Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Cunningham. I'm the AVP for Alumni Relations at Lehigh University. And I'm thrilled today to be here with Donald Dowding, the Vice President for Equity and Community, and the university's Diversity and Inclusion Officer, the first of its kind here at Lehigh. I think Donald's been here for about 3 years. Is that right? About three. And today he's going to talk with us about a exciting class that he is teaching through the Vistex Institute. So he'll talk for 5 or 10 minutes about that class and why it's important for all of us, material that he's teaching. And then we'll have a chance to open it up to your questions. And we'll do that through the chat box. If you just go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the chat, just click on that. And you can either make your chats available to all attendees or just to the panelists. In any event, I will read them aloud for Donald so that he can focus on answering versus reading those questions. So I hope you will enjoy this. I know I'm looking forward to it, and we'll get started. Donald.
Well, I hope you will enjoy this also. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Donald Dowding. I'm Lehigh's first Vice President for Equity and Community. And I actually started here February 1st, 2017, having been the Chief Diversity Officer for the U.S. Military Academy at West Point prior to this, and the Director of the Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity as well there. I also served as a professor of mathematics at West Point for 17 years, and in that role led many of the efforts to become a change agent within the Academy towards creating broader diversity, equity, and inclusion within U.S. Military Academy West Point, but also in the Department of Defense and the Department of the Army more broadly. During that time as a D&I practitioner, I not only honed my skills by attending and graduating from the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute, but I also led efforts to train and develop other diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioners within the Department of the Army as well. After coming to Lehigh, I wanted to ground myself in this work and become a leader in higher education and how diversity and inclusion practitioners function in higher education. Because at the time, one of the things I noticed was that the business world had really done a lot of work in building the Chief Diversity Officer position within organizations, but higher education had not yet caught up to what the industry, private sector had already been engaged in. And so one of the things I did was I joined the board of the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education and has helped develop and lead their curriculum on developing the standards of the professional practice for diversity officers in higher education. So this developing others to become change agents within organizations is something that's a passion of mine. I mean, I'm an educator. I love being in the classroom, but I also love being a practitioner that's about driving change within organizations. One of the things that's going to be unique about this particular course and what I'm excited about, this idea of creative inclusion within the organizations, is that this is going to be different, slightly different in the approach that we have gone about diversity, inclusion, and equity efforts before. And the reason why it's different is because of the current environment and climate we're in right now. Prior to, I would say, March of this year, many of us were more involved in transactional approaches to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It has been about how do we develop the individual, how do we train the individual, how we sensitize the individual, how do we hold individuals accountable in creating a more inclusive environment. Since March of this year, and in the wake of the death of George Floyd, as well as, I'll say, the current social justice movement, there has been a demand for organizations to engage in a more systemic approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion? How do we as an organization hold ourselves accountable? How do we identify the barriers to racial equity within our organizations? And how do we lead that change as change agents within our organization? This is what this course is going to be focusing on. How can we empower others within our organizations to help lead some of the transformational change that's going to really turn us into a truly inclusive organization? So with that, I'm going to stop talking. So one, I can take questions, and also, more importantly, I'm looking forward to some sort of conversation on this. And I understand that this will be moderated through a Q&A process, but I hope through that process we have a dialogue on how this can be very beneficial to many.
Thank you, Donald. All right, so now that's your cue, everyone, to click on that chat box and type in your questions or comments there. It would also be interesting for those of you who have taken a course like this, especially to share your thoughts about how those courses went in preparation for Donald to make his class the great class I know it will be. Donald, you have been teaching this for years, and I would like to know, you know, when you're teaching these, what surprises you? Are you generally heartened by what you see happen in the classroom? Does it make you even more determined to teach more people? What surprises you?
Yeah, well, I'll use the word surprise, but it's more enlightening than surprise when I see the transformation that people experience, the self-awareness that people experience through the very interactive engagement that they're going to be involved in. I mean, you know, my style of approach to this is not one of death by PowerPoint or lecture. It is really truly a very interactive, engaged style where we discover the answers to problem solutions. We become aware of the issues and concerns. We equip and take on the skill sets necessary to be the change agents through a very integrated process of practical exercises that lead to discussion and dialogue and solutions. Mm-hmm. So great. To answer you, I answered a couple questions, I know, but the bottom line is what I'm always inspired by, what I'm always surprised by is how quickly people experience their own awakening, self-awareness, metamorphosis, if you will, in just a short period of time.
Nice. Scott's question is about what are the most important metrics of inclusion and diversity, and what's the scope of diversity that should be covered at a university?
So, well, that's a good question from Scott. When you say the important metrics, I think they're, what's important is going to be dependent on the organizational goals, okay? So first of all, I'm going to say that. So metrics can be quantifiable type metrics. So if you are embarked on an effort in what I'll call the diversity realm, then metrics are going to be about numbers because and numbers, how you break down those numbers are going to be depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. So I would argue that most institutions have very broad diversity, very broad diversity. However, that diversity may not show up when we look at gender diversity. It may not show up when we look at racial diversity. It may not show up when we talk about geographic diversity. So those metrics are going to be dependent on what are your goals? What is it you're trying to accomplish? And then I'll say, as far as inclusion, some important metrics are going to be, how you look at how are people being valued within the organization? What does your senior leadership look like and compared to your non-exempt staff personnel? What does promotion and tenure look like within your organization? These are going to be metrics of inclusion that you can look at. Command climate surveys. How do people feel about diversity and inclusion within your organization? How do people experience it within your organization? And then finally, I'll say, looking at an institutional artifacts. Inclusion, we often forget that because sometimes we forget to look at how we're assessing the message that we are sending to our community by what we show that we value as a part of our historical perspective or the artifacts, those things that we memorialize on our campuses, how we name buildings and things like that. So the list of metrics go on, and I don't want to divulge the entire course right here, but one of the exercises that we do go through is how do we identify what are the important metrics for our particular organization based on what we're trying to do at this particular time.
Right. Great. Yeah, you could probably teach a whole 2-day class just on metrics alone.
Oh, absolutely. Because they're both qualitative, quantifiable metrics that we have to pay attention to.
Right. I'm going to jump to a question from Bill. When you conduct a class, is this awakening that you were talking about more prominent to the white or the Black participants?
Well, both. So I'm going to speak for self right now because, as a Black man in America, I thought I knew, and that's how I identify, by the way. My identity is as a Black cisgendered male growing up in Baltimore, Maryland, in inner city, formative years spent in the 60s, college years in the late 70s, early 80s. So my ideas and perceptions were based on those experiences of that identity group. And so until I went through the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute, I thought I knew everything I needed to know about leading change as it pertained to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I had to say I was truly transformed. It transformed me in a manner in that it made me hungry for knowledge, to know more, to better understand. It made me aware that the things that I was consuming, the information I was consuming, were through third-party narratives of what is factual and what's not factual. It caused me to want to dig deeper, to find firsthand accounts of information, firsthand historical perspectives, and made me the, I'll say, advocate that I am today for, and a champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was, and the reason why I'm speaking for myself, because others have shared their narrative like that with me. You just don't know what you don't know. Yes, for many of the white participants, they learned quite a bit. And I think if you ever have read Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, she talks about that awakening for many of our white community members of this awareness, this discovery of their own identity, and that they're in their own racial identity, and what some of the things that we're hearing in the social media sector, but in the public sector, of what does it mean to be white in America? What does it mean to be Black in America? That all of these things have meaning. So yeah, I do see it in both groups, but it manifests itself in very different ways on how people discover their own personal being and understanding.
Nice. Victoria's question is specifically about the course. Do you think folks with a significant level of experience in similar roles as change agents would benefit from this course?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They'll benefit from, one of the greatest benefits from this course is the interaction with the others in the course. And again, that's my personal experience, having gone through practices and practical experiences myself, but also I'm always learning something new. As a D&I professional, and I do count myself as a D&I professional now, you're constantly learning and evolving. And my constant learning and evolving because my connection with other beings who put me in connection with other ideas and concepts that forced me to either go research and challenge so that I can participate in the proper discourse around this. I participated, I considered myself a professional 3 years ago in 2017 when NADAHE first launched, that's the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, launched their very first Standards of the Professional Practice Institute. Now I participated, and during that participation, I was considered what one was called a seasoned professional, D&I professional at that time. I learned so much. I learned so much in hearing other people's stories, narratives, challenges, perspectives. So absolutely, no matter what your background and experience, I truly do believe you will benefit at some level. And also your voice in this exercise in empowering others and educating others by participating in this exercise is of great value to the cohort as well.
That's a great point. Yeah. And as much as everyone else hopefully is evolving, your work will never be done. It'll just be different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
John's question, thoughts on the catch-22 that Princeton is in, moving forward while recognizing racial inequities of the past. And I'm sure that our businesses are going to be in the same predicament.
Okay, so if you want my true opinion, I'm going to give it to you. So as John Lewis says, I might get into a little good trouble here. I think that's a very political move by the Department of Defense, and that's right. I'm saying, and I think unfortunately that we have weaponized the Department of Defense. I mean, the Department of Education. I'm sorry. By the Department of Education, weaponized the Department of Education to try and shut down these activities. That if an organization comes out and says that, hey, we want to confront our historical past, I think it's unconscionable that in return, what we do is we then, okay, you're admitting that you have been racist in the past, so we're going to launch a civil rights investigation against you as an organization. It's trying to do the right thing and make things better. That's just described as a despicable move. And this is not I'm not speaking as a partisan politician in any way. I just think it's just despicable, period, that we have weaponized our government agencies to mute or to shut down efforts that are trying to make that are about creating a better quality of life for all human beings on this planet. It's just a shame.
Yeah, well, and it's the business equivalent of all of us who admit we all have bias. And just to admit that doesn't mean, right, that you get blamed forever for the future.
Well, yeah, to deny that racism has not been a part of our historical past is not going to help us move forward. If anything, it's just going to hinder us and to hold us back from the true progress we really can make.
Right. Rob's question, what is your guess about the percentage of our community that is only willing to provide lip service to the diversity movement?
Say that one more time.
It says, what's your guess around the percentage of our community that's only willing to provide lip service to the diversity movement?
Oh, so, look, I'm a mathematician, and to take a guess at the percentage of folks, I mean, that would require me to be more of a polymath than I truly am. I consider myself somewhat of a historian, a lot of a mathematician, a bit of a sociologist, a bit of a psychologist at times, depending on the situation. So I'm somewhat of a polymath, but I'm not there. So to try and determine the percentage of those that are just more engaged in paying the lip service, I couldn't tell you. I really couldn't take a venture to guess, because you just don't know what's in people's hearts and souls. But I will say that for those that are just only about engaging this from the perspective of just paying lip service to it or being in what I'll describe as very transactional mode to diversity, equity, and inclusion, they reveal themselves very quickly. Once, and that's one of the things that you'll learn in this course is you're going to encounter that. The second you try to move towards a systemic approach to DEI, you're going to see some active resistance in that people are going to take it personally or people will be uncomfortable, or you're going to find those that you're talking about that are more comfortable with addressing this from by just paying lip service to the work and not really committed, if you will, to the true systemic approach to transformation that we're talking about doing. But I'm sorry I couldn't answer your question. But percentage, that's hard. But I appreciate the fact that there are those out there that are more interested in just dialogue, but not action.
Yeah, here's another math question that may be more answerable. Are general population ethnicity statistics a fair guideline for student ethnicity composition?
To some respect, I mean, so, if you read Nathan Graw's book, Demographics and the Demand for Higher Education, then, or the Witchy report, I think the 2019 Witchy report on the changing demographics, the storm that's coming, as they say, I would say yes, that they are a good starting point for establishing, and what I'm assuming you're referring to are the goals for class composition goals, but even faculty goals, hiring goals. I think that's a good starting point. But then you also have to look at your particular field or discipline and further hone those goals and constantly work towards improving towards those goals. For some, these goals come off as aspirational in nature, but they can be informed by a lot of different metrics that you can look at to inform. And composition society, hey, higher education, we need to be aware of that because the demographics are changing. It's been reported in other reports, and a couple I just pointed out to you, resources for it. And if we're not paying attention, if we're not aspiring to be more inclusive, if we're not looking at the numbers, here's what we risk. We risk becoming illegitimate in the eyes of that evolving demographic community. And it's not just race, but it is I'll say the collective social identities that are coming out of this new generation and how they're seeing the world, what they're communicating. It's a very different population of people that we are looking to, I won't use the word entice, but to try to recruit or to try to enroll in our institutions. And so we have to pay attention to that group.
Right. Well, and I was just thinking about Michael Bloomberg's gift with the intention of creating more Black graduates and then you can imagine, there's the issue of not enough Black doctors and not enough Black teachers. And so Bloomberg is trying to get at the root of the problem, I think, to get more Blacks into that pipeline for the greater good of society. So
yeah, so he's providing his financial resources to help those who can actually get through the hurdles and the obstacles and the barriers just to get themselves to a point where they can accept an award like that. So there's other social issues that we have to address, and we all play a part in that and how we can improve the leaky pipeline, if you will. But I definitely appreciate the work of philanthropists like Bloomberg and the Bloomberg Foundation and what they're trying to do to provide financial resources for those who can get through that obstacle course, so they now can get access.
Right. Ron has a question. What role does socioeconomic diversity play in your classes? He says, I find people refer to diversity and inclusion without discussing belonging. Can you have inclusion without a targeted effort to ensure a culture of belonging?
No, you can't. Um, I appreciate the question. Who was that from? Ron, you said?
Ron Paulson. Yep.
I like that question. Absolutely. If you look at the work of John Powell out at Berkeley and his center around othering and belongingness, I mean, that's exactly what he preaches and teaches, that we have to focus on othering and belonging within organizational structures. And socioeconomic status is a big part of the work of the diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioners. I mean, it's a big part of what Lehigh has been engaged in for a number of time. We set up an entire center around our socioeconomic status as we embark on this path to prominence and increasing the undergraduate student population with 1,000 students, being aware that, if we're going to attract the talent that is out there in the United States, we're going to have to, one, provide resources so that, one, they have access to the institution. That's through the financial aid. But then how do they have access to the high impact experiential learning that's associated with elite institutions like the Lehigh universities and the Ivies and the Ivy Plus? It's not enough that we just bring them on board. So this sense of belonging, connectivity, we've far too long seen that there's been two different experiences had by students who attend elite institutions, one of the privileged and one of those who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And we're trying to close that gap as well.
Right. So a question from Bill, what differences do you come across when you use Zoom instead of face-to-face class? Especially, I would think, with such an emotional topic. Have you taught a Zoom class yet?
I have taught a Zoom class, yes. I've taught virtually on other platforms before this, but I will say this will be the first time that I will be delivering an entire curriculum or course via Zoom. So we're going to see some of the differences. And to be truthful, because I am a very interactive person, I've had to adapt a lot of the practical exercises into an online environment. How does this play out in an online environment? There's some practical exercises I just couldn't do. Some of my favorite ones that, oh my God, when people have these epiphanies, like, oh my God, these we won't be able to do, unfortunately. But I have some other great ones that I'm working with Steve and his crew on, or actually Steve is the crew, Pasco is the crew, in converting some of these to how do these practical exercises play out online. So some of this we're going to be learning for the first time, but I do have a lot of experience on engaging students, especially in an online session. I used to teach math this way to those that I was tutoring that were all over the country, of course, and I couldn't meet with them personally. So we would Skype and do work that way as well. So I do have a background doing it, but this will be fun. I think a fun experience.
Yeah. Rob has another question that I particularly like, and you'll know why when I read it. Okay. Our history as an institution in regard to inclusion was quite poor in the past. How do we share this new inclusion idea with thousands of alums who grew up and were educated in an entirely different era? Rob, I live it every day.
Yeah, Jennifer, how do we do that?
I think you're breaking up. I'm going through a tunnel.
Well, you continue to you continuously communicate around this and provide opportunities, I would say, for people to come in and learn. One of the most important aspect of doing this work is self-education. I've constantly encouraged people, seek me out for my understanding or my interpretation or my best practices on how you can do this work. But most importantly, what you have to do is you have to be willing and committed to doing some sort of self-education around this. When I wanted to put a deck on my home, one of the things I did was I had to go equip myself with the skills necessary in order to do that. And so I encourage others that, yeah, and I did the whole, let's attend a Lowe's or a Home Depot home improvement workshop on how to get familiar and acquainted with these things. But that was only my entry point into digging deeper, because I'm a perfectionist in nature. So I needed to understand so much more, everything for, example for me, I'll just show you how deep my OCD goes. I wanted to understand how pressure treated wood worked and why was it resistant to pesticides and things like that. So I needed to dig deeper to understand all this, and so that I could actually truly construct a deck that I would be proud of. And I will say that in this work, this is very similar, and how we communicate to our alumni is very similar. We have to find a way to inspire them to want to dig deeper, to understand, so they move towards action and not just conversation.
Yeah, my hope is that they'll take classes like you're teaching, whether it's through Lehigh and Vistex, or a lot of the big corporations are now offering classes like this as well. And I'm hoping that they'll take them through there. But it is after 1 o'clock and we have a lot of other questions here. So what I will do is we are recording this, so we'll save the chat and send you some of these inquiries. I did have to notice Caroline was a grad student in the 80s, a woman at Lehigh, and saw some of this kind of discrimination up close and personal, but sounds like things are changing now. Let's hope that we continue to evolve as an institution through discussions like this. I really do appreciate your time today, Donald, and we could sit here all day. It would be fascinating to be learning from you and from everybody on the call. So thank you for your time. Thank you everybody for participating. We will send out more information about the course, which starts in just a few weeks, correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And please, I'm hoping to see some of you join this conversation, join this experience. The more, the better. And I love, and all the different perspectives as well. Please think about it if you can, to participate in this course. Again, like I said, it's gonna be the first, it's the inaugural one that I'll be doing here at Lehigh, and I guarantee you it's gonna be powerful and it'll be fun.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Outing, and thank you for everyone for participating today.